The Lost World, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, part of the Oxford's Dominoes series, number 2. The series editors are Bill Bowler and Sue Parmenter. Text adaptation by Susan Kingsley and illustrated by Anders Westerberg. Chapter 5. I Have the Answer. This was a wild, unfriendly place and full of danger. But when we looked up at that beautiful green plateau, we all wanted to discover its secrets and mystery. None of us was ready to go back to London yet. Then, one night, something wonderful happened. Something that changed everything for us. We were sitting around our campfire and our dinner. A large chicken was cooking on the fire. Suddenly, out of the dark sky, something flew down at us. We looked up and saw two enormous wings of grey skin, a long thin neck, a horrible red eye, and to my great surprise, 100 small sharp teeth. A second later, it was flying back into the night with our dinner in its teeth. For a long time, nobody could say a word. At last, Summerlee spoke in a quiet, shaking voice. "Professor Challenger, I am deeply sorry." Then the two scientists shook hands for the first time. The night the pterodactyl stole our dinner was truly a great night. The lost food didn't matter at all, but we still could not get up to the plateau. After 6 days walking around the cliffs, we arrived back at our starting place, the rocky pinnacle. When I lay down to sleep that night, I could see Challenger sitting unhappily on a rock. His great head was in his hands, and he was thinking deeply. But the next morning, Challenger was bright and smiling and walking up and down proudly. "I have the answer," he said, holding his head high and pointing to the pinnacle of rock. We could see that climbing the pinnacle was not possible. But what then? "Let us get up to the top first," the professor went on in a loud, important voice. "There, G.E. Challenger will show you his plan." Challenger was a fine mountaineer, and with the help of a strong 50-meter rope, he climbed the pinnacle easily. After about an hour, the four of us were all at the top, together with Gomez and Manuel. From that high place, I could see everything. The rocky open ground below, the cliffs, the yellow wall of bamboo, then the great, dark green forest, which went on for 2,000 miles. It was a beautiful sight. I felt Challenger's heavy hand on my arm. "This way, my young friend," he said. "Never look back." My eyes turned to the plateau. Its edge was perhaps 12 meters away from where we stood. So near, but still so far. I looked down and saw our servants on the ground far below us. Professor Summerlee was looking carefully at the pinnacle's one great tree. "This is interesting," he said. "It's just like an English tree." "It is," replied Challenger. "It's a friend from home in a strange country. And believe me, that tree will be our friend." "That's it!" shouted Lord John. "A bridge!" "Yes, my good sirs, a bridge," said Challenger. "It really was a very clever idea. It was my job as the youngest and strongest man to cut the 20-meter tree." Challenger gave me the axe and told me where to make each careful cut. After nearly an hour of work with the axe, the great tree fell. One end of it lay at our feet and the other end lay on the plateau. Without a word, we each shook hands with Challenger. Challenger himself crossed the bridge first. Summerlee followed him. I went next, and then Lord John. So at last, the four of us were standing in the lost world of Maple White. We walked a short way into the trees. Then, suddenly, we heard a loud crack. We all turned and ran back to the edge of the plateau. The bridge was no longer there. I looked down, and far below, I could see our tree lying on the ground, broken into pieces. Then we all looked across at the pinnacle. Then there we saw Gomez. His face was wild and strange. His black eyes burned like fires. "Lord John Roxton!" he shouted. "Here I am!" Lord John called back. "Yes, and there you'll stay!" screamed Gomez with a loud, horrible laugh. "We nearly killed you with that stone at the cave, but this is better. It is slower and more terrible. The hot sun will whiten your bones, and nobody will find them. When you are dying up there, think of Pedro Lopez. You shot him 3 years ago on the Putumayo River. I am his brother. Remember him." Then he and Manuel climbed down the pinnacle and left us. Lord John sat on the ground with a face like grey stone. "It's my fault. You're all in this trouble because I killed Gomez's brother. I've been so stupid. Why didn't I think?" We looked over to the pinnacle and saw that our good servant Zambo was climbing up as fast as he could. "What shall I do now, sirs?" he called to us when he was at the top. "The Indians are leaving, but I won't go, sirs. I'll stay with you." We told Zambo to throw one end of the rope to us. Then he tied a bag to the other end of the rope, and we pulled it across. We did this many times, and when evening came, we had food, water, guns, and everything for a cliff-top camp. That night, I wrote a letter to MacArdale. The Indians were going home to Manaus the next day, and they could take it with them. Was it perhaps my last letter then? There was no way to get down from the plateau. It was impossible. So I sat and wrote in the bright, cold moonlight of this strange world, and I felt that there was no hope for us. Really, no hope. With that, we come to the end of chapter 5. Chapter 6. A truly wonderful sight. "What shall we call this place?" asked Lord John after breakfast. "It can only have one name, the name of the man who discovered it." "This is Maple White Land," said Challenger. We all agreed. We made our camp as safe as possible, building a wall of sharp plants around it. Then we began our first journey into Maple White Land. The plateau was full of unusual things. Our scientists discovered many interesting plants and flowers. Late that first morning, we found some great footprints in the earth and followed them excitedly. Then, between the trees, we saw a truly wonderful sight. A family of 5 enormous green dinosaurs. They were nearly 7 meters long. We watched them from behind the trees while they slowly ate great mouthfuls of plants. After a long while, they moved slowly into the forest. The professors looked joyful. "What are they?" asked Lord John. "Iguanodons," answered Summerlee. Millions of years ago, England was full of iguanodons. Then they died. But here on this plateau, they are still alive. After about 5 kilometers, we came to a large group of rocks. We heard some strange sounds, and quietly and carefully we looked over the rocks. The place was full of pterodactyls. There were thousands of the things sitting around little lakes of stagnant water. The smell was terrible. Then they saw us. One after the other, they sailed up into the sky and flew around up in a large ring. Suddenly, they attacked. A great grey wing knocked Challenger to the ground, and I felt sharp teeth on my neck. Another of the monsters flew at Summerlee, giving him a great bloody cut across his face. Lord John pointed his rifle at the sky, shot, and a pterodactyl fell to the ground. The others flew higher into the sky. "Now!" shouted Lord John. "Run for your lives!" We escaped back to our camp, thinking that the day's adventures were at an end. But a surprise met us. Our things were lying all over the ground. One tin of meat was open. Our cameras were broken. Our box of bullets lay in pieces, and there were bullets everywhere. But there was not a single footprint going to or from the camp. Perhaps someone or something used the large tree near our camp to cross over our high camp walls. At once I felt a deepening danger all around us. Whose eyes were watching us from those dark trees? What dangers were hiding in the silent forest? That night I went to bed with my head full of these ideas. While I was lying there, Lord John asked me a strange question. "I say, Melon, remember the place where those flying things were? Well, do you remember the earth there near the water?" "Yes, I do," I said. "It was very soft and blue." "That's right, soft, blue earth," he said, and walked away. The next day, we decided that we needed a map of Maple White Land. This time, I was the one who had the clever idea. There was an enormous tree beside our camp. Perhaps I could climb up it and see more of the plateau. My friends helped me get up into the tree at once. I was high up in the great tree when suddenly I saw something. A face was looking into my face. It was long and thin, with strange glassy green eyes and great sharp teeth. It was the face of an ape man. For a second I saw a red, hairy body jump through the trees, and then it disappeared. For a minute I could not move, but then I finished my climb, and soon I could see all of the plateau. Forest, red rocks, and in the center, a beautiful lake. On the other side of the lake were some tall cliffs with dark holes in the side of them. Perhaps they were caves. In the soft evening light, I drew a map of everything. Then I made my way back down the tree and told the others about my meeting with the ape man. Later, we put names on the map. "What shall we call this lake?" asked Challenger. "You saw it first, young friend, so you must give it a name. Lake Melon, if you like." "Well," I said, blushing, "I'd like to call it Lake Gladys." That night the moon was bright. and I could not sleep. I got up and quietly left the camp. I'll never forget that dark, lonely walk through the silent forest. After some hours, I saw water between the trees. Lake Gladys, my Lake Gladys, lay in front of me, silver and beautiful in the bright moonlight. On the other side of the lake, I could see the tall cliffs again, with their round, dark holes. But now there was something inside the caves, something bright, red and burning. Fires! So there were men living on the plateau. I could even see the campfires darken for a second or two when people walked in front of them. I lay there for a long time, watching those red fires. Animals came to drink, strange and beautiful animals. Then came a great dinosaur with a small head, short legs, and a horrible blue-gray body, and big sharp plates along its back. Where have I seen that monster before? I thought. Then I remembered. It was the dinosaur from Maplewhite's drawing. At 2:30, I began my journey back through the dark forest. When I was about halfway back to the camp, I heard a long, deep growl behind me. I walked faster, and the sound became louder and closer. Something was following me. My skin grew cold. I turned around, and suddenly I saw it, an enormous dinosaur, standing more than 12 meters tall. It gave a loud roar, and I saw its enormous sharp teeth. The red bled around its horrible mouth. This was a meat-eating dinosaur, one of the most terrible monsters that have ever lived. I turned and ran, but the monster's great legs carried it nearer and nearer to me, and its roar became louder and louder, and I ran and ran faster than I've ever run in my life. I felt his hot body close behind me. Then there was a sudden crash. I was falling down into something deep and dark. When I opened my eyes again, all was quiet. Above me, I could see bright stars in a circle of black sky. I was in a deep hole. In the center of the hole stood a tall stick, as sharp as a knife, with blood. This was a trap made by the people of the plateau. A heavy animal that fell into it could never climb out again. But for a man, it was not difficult. Before long, I was at the top, looking out and listening. The dinosaur was far away by now. The sky was already beginning to whiten, and I felt the cold wind of morning on my face as I went on home. But another surprise was waiting for me there. The camp was empty. Our things lay broken on the ground, and there was blood on the grass. I ran around wildly, calling my friends' names, but no answer came. All that day I waited for them. I could see our good servant Zambo sitting by his campfire far below at the bottom of the cliffs. But up here on the plateau I was alone. At last I fell asleep, thinking about my 3 brave friends. I have never felt so afraid or so lonely. With that, we come to the end of chapter 6. See you again in another video where we'll cover the final chapters 7 and 8. Hope you like listening to it, and leave a like down and do subscribe, and let me know in the comments what else book you would like me to read to you. Ta-ta, take care.